Hi, thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Mike Cosentino, and I am here with Danielle McCain, and Jessica Schneider will be joining us later on tonight. We are here on behalf of the Wiley Resource Center, who provide legal help to the community in Chicago, primarily on the west side. They are available if you would like to call them. If you have any questions about the show, their phone number is here on the screen. It's 773-738-1480. And again, they host monthly programs as well where they provide legal information throughout the community. We are a call-in program, and you can see our phone number there at the bottom of the screen. It is 312-738-1060. Now, like I said earlier, we have Danielle McCain here with us, and she's joining us from the Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under Law, Inc.
Danielle, long name, huh?
Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Thank you very much for joining us. I'm great. I'm good. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights
under Law, Inc.
Under Law, Inc.
We go by CLC for short. That's much easier, right?
Much easier, much easier.
Chicago Lawyers Committee is the leading civil rights organization in the city of Chicago. We have been around since 1969, and we have a long history of civil rights work here in the city of Chicago and advocacy as well. We are a civil rights legal nonprofit, which means that we do litigation, advocacy, as well as outreach in the community. Our work is divided into several projects. They are the Fair Housing Project. That's the project that I work on primarily. Mm-hmm. The Hate Crimes Project, the Voting Rights Project, the Education Project, the Settlement Assistance Project, and the Law Project, which provides legal services to nonprofits and small businesses. Mm-hmm. If you feel like you've been a victim of discrimination or your civil rights have been violated, then you should contact the Chicago Lawyers Committee. Our phone number is 312-630-9744, and you can also go to our website, and that's www.clccrul.org.
You know what, I'll throw that up here on the overhead just in case. Again, that's their information. Now, Danielle, can you tell us a little bit about obviously, when we call, if a person is to call up and ask for help, what is the process that they're going to go through?
Sure. There's an intake process where the person that you talk with on the phone initially will usually either discuss your situation at that point, or they'll take down just basic information and then forward that on to a person that works in our office, who will then call you back and schedule an appointment to discuss the circumstances of your potential case over the phone. So that's usually the first step in the process.
Now, is this a pro bono program, or is this for cost? Is this a volunteer thing, or? Well,
the consultation obviously is for free. Mm-hmm. If in fact we do take your case, then there is a fee associated with the case.
Oh, very nice. Well, that's good. Now, you said you're particularly involved in the fair housing portion of CLC.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the fair housing portion of it?
The Fair Housing Project, like I said earlier, is one of the projects under the Chicago Lawyers Committee. The Fair Housing Project focuses on eliminating discrimination in housing, as well as promoting diversity in housing as well. The laws that cover fair housing, under which we file cases, as well as our advocacy work, are the Fair Housing Act, which is national. Right. And then locally we have the Cook County Ordinance and Chicago, City of Chicago laws and ordinances that we follow in terms of protecting fair housing rights.
Now, what's the most typical problem that you'll run across with the Fair Housing Project?
So most of our cases are based on race discrimination and disability discrimination, but there's also a range of protected classes that fall under the law. So it could be race, color, religion, national origin, sex, familial status, and like I said earlier, disability. So there's various protected classes under which you might have a case for discrimination.
Okay, I gotcha. Would you be able to elaborate a little bit more on I guess, the law aspect of it? How do I know that I'm being discriminated against, or how do I know that I should even be calling the
Sure.
Chicago Lawyers Committee?
Well, the laws are spelled out in terms of what falls under discrimination. You first have to be part of a protected class, and that's what I outlined earlier: race, color, religion, national origin, sex, familial status,
Okay.
and disability. So you first have to be a part of a protected class.
Okay.
The second thing that has to also go along with that is that you have to have an act that a prohibited act. So refusing to rent or refusing to sell, in addition to the fact that you're part of a protected class. Those two things together um, then are a violation, a fair housing violation.
Would this apply to maybe a landlord's failure to repair a hot water heater, or
Okay.
repair damages in a house that are kind of the essentials?
Okay. Well, that's a good question. We get that a lot. Those are landlord-tenant issues, and that's different from having a discrimination issue or a fair housing issue. We particularly deal with the specific protected class and some type of discrimination or violation based on being a member of that protected class. So an example of that would be a landlord, rather than not fixing your apartment, an issue in your apartment, our focus is on a landlord refusing to rent to you, or changing the terms in you getting an apartment. The rent is more, or you have to pay an additional security deposit, something of that nature, based on your race or based on your disability, one of those protected classes. So that's the difference between landlord-tenant and fair housing law.
Okay. Just a reminder, this is a call-in program, and so again, if you have any questions for Danielle or Jessica later on, please feel free to call that phone number at the bottom of the screen there, 312-738-1060. Did you have
I would
anything
just
else to add
say
to
that a lot of times the complaints that we file are against landlords, property managers, condo associations, and sometimes we even have cases against neighbors. So there's a range of individuals or actors that are part of that, or rather are part of the discrimination, or may have the act that violates a fair housing law.
I got you. And so when somebody calls up CLC, is there going to be somebody there that will kind of help them figure out whether or not, is that what the consultation is?
Sure. In the consultation, we have a very detailed form that helps work through, first off, if you're part of a protected class, which is what we want to figure out initially, and then if in fact there was some violation of the law or prohibited act that violates the law. So even if you aren't sure, we always have asked people to call us if you have an inkling or feeling that you've been discriminated against, or just something didn't feel right about that situation.
Right.
To give us a call, and we'll help you determine whether or not you've actually been discriminated against, or if there's anything that we can actually do for you under the circumstances.
Now, what are some fair expectations for somebody that thinks they may have a just claim? What is something that somebody that's been discriminated against, what's something fair that they could expect out of litigation or out of a settlement?
Well, initially we look to figure out if it's something that we can advocate for that person. So if it's a circumstance where the landlord has told you that, for example, that they don't take Section 8,
Right.
and we in fact know that it's against the law not to accept Section 8 in Cook County and Chicago, then we can reach out to that landlord and say, this is a violation of the law. this person should be able to fill out the paperwork and go through the whole process to try to rent this property. And if they fit all of the rest of the, requirements, then you have to allow them to rent this property. So that's advocacy rather than filing a lawsuit, because sometimes people don't want to go through the whole lengthy process of litigation.
Right, absolutely. It's burdensome.
So in that situation, depending on what the client wants and what makes sense under the circumstances, then we would suggest advocacy, and that would be an example of that. Depending on the facts of the case and what has transpired, usually gives us some guidance as to whether we want to advocate, whether we want to file a lawsuit. And, sometimes there's something, things that we really can't do.
Right.
Another thing that we try to do as a project is training, because you can assume that landlords or housing providers know the fair housing laws and what they can and cannot do.
Right.
But sometimes they just aren't aware. So we try to go out and do trainings proactively, sometimes for landlords that are interested in just being knowledgeable. And then as part of our litigation, if we resolve the case, we always include training as one of the other remedies or in the case, so that we can make sure that this, the goal is that these things don't continue to happen.
Right.
And these providers are aware, and you know better, you do better.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
That's the thought.
And I mean that this stuff it's a huge problem in the Chicago area. For our watchers that have watched us several times in the past, that through Wiley Resource Center we are working on an ordinance to sort of help advance the landlord training programs in the future. I don't know if you were aware of that, Danielle, but
We were not aware, but that's a great thing that you all are doing.
Absolutely. With Wiley, we're trying to advance a Chicago ordinance to require landlords to go to training in the future.
Okay.
Which would be great. And it sounds like it's sort of a tangent of what you guys are doing as well, which is great.
Sure, absolutely. That would be, really great. Again, you can do better when you know better. So that's our thought around training, and then just outreach. In addition to landlords and housing providers not knowing, a lot of individuals in the community, potential tenants, don't know, and owners too, because it's also involves people that are looking to own a property, don't know their rights.
Right.
So a lot of times it goes unreported because people kind of just aren't sure of what occurred or don't know that they have housing rights.
Oh, right, absolutely.
And that this has been, whatever occurred is a violation of their rights. So we do a lot of community outreach, so that we go to different events and festivals and so on, and pass out materials and answer questions, so that individuals in the community are aware, and when something occurs, they know to contact the Chicago Lawyers Committee and ask questions and make a complaint or what have you.
Well, that sounds great. It sounds like you guys are really getting out there, doing some outreach in the community too, to get awareness for CLC out there.
We're trying our best. We are on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, and we have our website, and the website is very comprehensive, so a lot of the questions that you may have, you can get answered on the website, and then it has all of our contact information, so it's a good resource. It's www.clcrul.org.
Put it up on the overhead one more time. And also, so this is your address too. This is where somebody would be able to walk in. Do you guys take walk-ins or no?
We don't take walk-ins, so we require you to give us a call and make an appointment. We do that first interview over the phone, and then after that point, once our team discusses the case, then we decide if we want to bring the individual in for a second interview.
Well, awesome.
So that's the way that it works.
Thank you very much, Danielle, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We are going to, again, this is a call-in program. We are here on behalf of Wiley Resource Center. Now going to be joining us is Jessica Schneider, who also works with CLC. again, just to reiterate, we are here on behalf of Wiley Resource Center. If you guys have any questions about anything that's being discussed on the show today, please feel free to contact the number that's on the screen there, 773-738-1480. Again, there are monthly programs that Wiley hosts, and they offer further legal information. They're available to answer any questions you may have, again, about anything that we've discussed today, or anything that you may any questions you may have in the future about any particular legal matter. Like I said, again, we have Jessica Schneider here joining us, also from Chicago Lawyers Committee, from For Civil Rights Under Law, Inc.
Yes.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Jessica.
Thank you for having us.
Now, you are here to talk about a different aspect of CLC, is that correct?
No, I'm actually going to stay with housing. But I was going to talk a little more specifically about some of the most common disability and the most common complaints we get, which are race and disability complaints. Mm-hmm. You were asking before kind of what's the typical problem that we see. And being in Chicago, which obviously most residents of Chicago know is a very segregated city.
Right.
And a lot of people are concentrated in certain areas of high poverty or of certain race. There isn't a lot of integration throughout the city. We get a lot of race complaints, and that's true of Illinois as a whole as well. So the Illinois Department of Human Rights, when it gets fair housing complaints, it got last year 150 were based on race discrimination, and 135 were based on disability, and that's both mental and physical disability. So we just wanted to bring awareness about the fact that race complaints are still very common. A lot of people think race discrimination doesn't exist anymore. It's something that hasn't really happened in the current city that we live in, and it is still happening a lot. And a classic example usually is someone who calls us up and says that they tried to answer an ad for an apartment and then maybe had their friend call, and maybe their friend is white and they are non-white, and the friend got an appointment to view the apartment and they did not. And so we can do further investigation to see if there was indeed a fair housing violation, and if this was based on the person's race or if it was based on some other factor.
What else would it be based on?
Well, sometimes it's based on things like a background check or a credit check or previous evictions, or sometimes it's just based on their perception of the person. Some people also tell us they don't think over the phone that they sound like they're a certain race, and maybe when they show up, the person is kind of surprised and reacts a certain way, or their body language gives off a certain impression. And so that's something that we can, if people aren't sure, it's better to just contact us, because we have ways of doing investigation, and that way we can look and see if there's an issue or if there's a possible fair housing violation. And as far as disability, one common complaint we get has to do with accessible parking spaces.
Okay.
So some older buildings in Chicago, don't have a lot of parking, and so they don't have spaces. Or it can be condo buildings as well that may deed the space with the unit, but they don't have one that's close enough to the door or has enough space for the person to get out if they need some sort of mobility assistance. And so that can also be a fair housing violation.
Does this apply to age as well, too, then?
So age, yes, is a protected class, but only on the state level.
Okay.
In the Illinois law, but yes, it's 40 and over, and it can be a possible discrimination as well. I mean, not everyone we see who's disabled is older.
Right.
Some people are, some people aren't.
Right.
And it can also include mental disabilities. So the most common thing is people are asking for some sort of accommodation. So maybe they need to have some sort of support animal or guide animal in a building that doesn't allow pets, or maybe they need some specific time they need to pay their rent on a different day because they have someone in aid who's helping them, things like that. And it's just a modification in a policy.
Okay.
And a lot of times landlords, they don't necessarily need to grant it. It has to be reasonable, but they need to at least try and engage with the person and try and decide if they're able to do it or not. So if they just ignore the request, that can be a fair housing violation.
So just want to make sure that I'm hearing this correctly. Is it true that a landlord can deny somebody the ability to lease out an apartment, just so long as it's not based on their race? They could do it for any other reason. They got a bad vibe or anything like that, so long as it's not based on race or their age or their disability.
Right. So if it's not, that's the thing you always need to find out, because technically, yeah, if someone just is a mean person and doesn't want you in their building, unfortunately, that's not against the law. People are allowed to select their own tenants. However, if there is something there that makes people think it's based on a protected class, we would want to be able to hear from them. So, but it's true, there has to be some balance in the law. And so if there's a legitimate reason, or even non-legitimate, that's not illegal, that someone's being rejected for an apartment, then that's not something you could file a fair housing complaint about.
Now, is this, like Danielle was talking about earlier, you have phone consultations. Is this something that somebody would be able to find out in that phone consultation whether or not, they should proceed, or whether or not their set of facts, meets the qualifications for discrimination? Is that something that they'll find out in that phone consultation?
Yes, that's something we can give them guidance about. And then, like I mentioned, we have staff that can do some investigation. So maybe there's something we can do that we can figure out. Have there been any previous fair housing violations with this landlord? Is there something that we can do to try and figure out? We can go by the building. If it's a disability situation, we can look at the parking spots, things like that, and do things that, regular people probably don't have the resources or the time to do. So we can definitely give them some guidance in that initial call, and then we'll bring people in to meet with them in person, because that's when you can really get a sense of what's going on and hear more detail. And so that's also important for us to meet them.
We'll continue
But
on.
we just do initial phone screenings because it helps with the volume.
Oh, absolutely. I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Now, Danielle was talking about after that phone consultation, if they're looking to move forward and if their facts, lend themselves to litigation or a settlement. She mentioned that, you guys aren't necessarily in charge of moving the case forward. Now, do you, when you do that, are the attorneys that you pass along the case to, are those CLC attorneys, or are those outside of CLC?
So the way the Lawyers Committee was formed and the way it works is that we have member law firms from around the city, from some of the bigger law firms and some smaller ones, and we still stay involved in the case. So we will be actively involved and we'll be a co-counsel on the case. The reason we use attorneys from law firms and they're doing this pro bono is so we can increase our resources. So we just have myself and Danielle and a couple more staff members, but these attorneys have more time and have more resources when it comes to litigation. But we still stay very involved with the case because we need to educate them on the civil rights law and the fair housing law.
That makes sense.
And then they, can take the lead and have more time and resources. And so that way we can really leverage our ability to take on more cases. And that makes it a lot easier and a lot more effective.
Oh, absolutely. I can imagine. Is there anything else that you would want to share with our viewers that you think may be important that we maybe glossed over or didn't get to touch on?
So the other thing we wanted to mention is source of income discrimination, because a lot of people don't know that you can be discriminated against based on your source of income. And the most common form of what we see are housing choice voucher discrimination. And within the city of Chicago and Greater Cook County, you can't refuse to rent to someone just because they have a housing choice voucher. And that helps bring the purpose of the voucher program to be more effective, because people are supposed to be having opportunity to move to neighborhoods with better opportunities in schools and employment and things like that. And so it's important to know that people can be discriminated against on their source of income, and if it's happening to you, you should definitely contact us.
Oh, absolutely. And again, we will throw up the number here just so that everybody knows. This is the phone number to contact. Jessica, do you want to read that off again?
Yeah, so our phone number is 312-630-9744, and that's for all general intake, and then you will get directed based on what your issue or problem is.
Fantastic. Thank you. Again, my name is Mike Cosentino. We are here on behalf of Wiley Resource Center. who is available to the greater Chicago area to assist you with any sort of legal questions you may have, any legal problems that you may run across. Again, I will throw up the phone number one more time just in case. It is 773-738-1480. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a great Thursday. Bye.